Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, wherever you are from. I hope you're okay during this time of the pandemic. My topic is about moral education. So, what is moral education? According to Chazan B. in 2022, moral education is one of the central concerns of philosophy of education, and over the years it's been described using a variety of terms such as moral education, values education, ethics and education, and character education. Also, according to R.M. Thomas, moral education concerns proper ways to act toward other people and, in some cultures, proper ways to act toward supernatural forces such as gods or ancestral spirits, and to non-human beings like animals or specified types rather, and the physical surroundings such as sacred forests, mountains, and waterways. Another definition is that of uh, Thomas, also in 1997. He said that all cultures teach such virtues as honesty, loyalty, respect, and courage. All disapprove of theft, deceit, and murder, and most usually prescribe additional moral rules not found in every other culture, like obeying God's commandments is an essential moral rule in Judaic, Christian, and Islamic cultures, but not in Chinese Taoism or international communism. Also, Wilson in 1967 said that moral education is a way of thinking about ethical issues rather than as a procedure for transmitting specific values to students. So, why should we teach moral education? According to Simon Freud, morals are not born into a person, they are nurtured. If we are looking at the human mind through a Freudian perspective, we are we are born with our human survival instincts in our id taking over. But as we grow older, we develop a superego, a part of our mind that deals in developing a conscience based on values, morals, and practices we are taught or learn to adapt to. The mixture of these two, the id and the ego, is the product of our, and the superego rather, is the product of our ego, or the part of our mind that we show to others through the way we act. As young children, actually, we learn from our parents, guardians, and environments what is right and what is wrong. However, theorists believe that if adults did not try to influence how their children would behave, their kids would still be capable of developing their own morals. Of course, this is impossible to do, which is why schools have most, if not all, have begun instilling moral virtues within its students through the lessons the school teaches. Now, who are expected to teach moral education? Durkheim believed that teachers should be models of morally correct behavior. Their mission is to transmit the core values of modern secular societies by pedagogy, personality, and public behavior. The teacher's task is not simply to pass on knowledge verbally, but also to model the good and the right. At the same time, the teacher must be concerned that the moral sphere does not become mere habit. Instead, it should be linked to reflection and understanding of core social values. Durkheim also indicated that as teachers, a teacher's authority must be tempered with benevolence and sensitivity to the frailty of the child and should not lapse into harshness. Now, is there a best strategy of teaching moral education? Still, according to Emil Durkheim, the best pedagogic device for developing the social elements of moral education is the utilization of the class as a social group for the nurturing of group pride, camaraderie, and loyalty. The school class should be the model for behaving according to society's highest and most worthy values. Durkheim's approach to moral education is the first iteration of a secular theory and practice of moral education for contemporary life. Now, what is our role as teachers in moral education? According to Karma, if we take forward route, we must go in the back step and rediscovering the core values. That is, that all reality holds on moral foundations and spiritual enigma. What should we do then as teachers? According to Shazam Steele, there are 5 ways on how we can teach moral education. First one is build character traits that involve resilience, perseverance, work ethic, critical thinking, and discipline. Another is prepare. Prepare students with the skills they need for the adult zone. Skills involve These skills involve financial literacy, awareness of addiction, mental and physical well-being, and digital literacy. Third is to teach. Teach the students the practical and culture addiction that represents in the ethos of the course, which dissolves tolerance, honesty, dignity, respect, and humility. Fourth is encourage and enable. Encourage and enable students to become engaged members of their community. And the last is teach. Teach students about ethics and enable them to value the wealth of culture available across and through across the tough world, rather. There are also 10 attributes to be put in action. This is according to Canadian International School of Vietnam. First is number one is peacemaking. We make the choice to calmly resolve conflicts and to practice actions that create an environment of acceptance and unity. Um, in the book of Social Dimensions of Education by Corpus, it stated there are 2 types of peace, a negative peace and a positive peace. The positive peace is the peace within, and the negative peace is peace that you have because you have stopped answering answering the persuasion for a war or for a conflict. Second one is respect. We show positive regard for and acceptance of others' thoughts, opinions, and feelings. We are inclusive and fair in our treatment of others. The best way of the best way I think of having respect towards others is having empathy, putting the shoes of others in your own, trying the shoes of others. Third one is integrity. We are honest, trustworthy, and genuine to ensure that our actions match our words. When we have integrity, we think that we cannot hide anything because there is a being, well, I am preaching, a being that sees everything that we do. Caring. We show kindness, compassion, empathy, and friendship towards others. And optimism, we have a positive attitude, resiliency to bounce back from adversity, and hope for the future. We do our part to make the world a better place. Sixth, we have perseverance. We demonstrate the effort and determination to complete a task to the best of our ability and to stick to that task even when it is difficult. perseverance. We have that thought of no matter what, I can do it. Seventh is courage. We have the strength and ability to face challenge even when it might be difficult or unpopular. We take the initiative to act without being prompted by others. Initiative. And responsibility for the eighth, we demonstrate self-discipline, self-control, reliability, and are accountable of our choices, words, and actions. We take care of others and our environment. In responsibility, we take note that with each right comes a responsibility. We may have the right to kill a person, but we have the responsibility to be jailed because it is a consequence of what we have done. Cooperation is ninth. We work together as a team to achieve a common goal or purpose. We think that we are interdependent and we have the thought of one for all for one. And the tenth is gratitude. We demonstrate a thankful and appreciative attitude and focus on the ways in which we are fortunate. Now we go to the critics of moral education. Despite the beauty that moral education is presenting us, there are still some critics of moral education as we cannot do away with it. According to Einstein, education is what remains after one has forgotten everything he learned in school. It is a miracle that curiosity survives formal education. And Plato said, knowledge that is acquired under compulsion obtains no hold in the mind. There are three important critiques of moral education. First is epistemological. This is still according to Shazam. The epistemological version of this argument says that schools should only teach verifiable and objective bodies of knowledge. So-called moral knowledge is neither verifiable nor objective in the same way as the sciences. Education should deal with only publicly verifiable and agreed upon contents, often characterized as scientific or rational. The second one is individualist. The individualist argument claims that the individual is the primary unit in life and schools should be concerned with the liberation and autonomy of the individual rather than the promulgation of a particular ethic. It opposes moral education on the grounds that it becomes a means by which the state of some power group, men, colonialists, Caucasians, and other such power groups, imposes their specific value beliefs. Education should be about ownership of self, and children should have the potential to be free choosing agents rather than be manipulated by a church or synagogue, big business, white capitalists, or gender specific worldviews. The third is empirical evaluative. The empirical evaluative critique of moral education is fact-based rather than ideological, stating that there is no valid or reliable empirical data to validate the value of moral education in schools. Its argument is that research shows that schooling is not a very important factor in affecting people's morality, and hence the entire enterprise of implementation in schools is a waste of time and money. Schools should do what they do best, and they should not attempt to undertake an impossible task. Now, there are also approaches to moral education. This is according to Chazam in 2022 on his write-up about what is moral education. First, we have the Wilson's model. The Wilson's model are the following. First is identifying the moral dilemma. Second is verifying the relevant facts and moral issues involved. And third, applying the principles of reasoning and consideration of other people's interests to enable moral action. The second model or approach to moral education is the values clarification approach. First, in the values clarification approach, there are 7 steps. First one is choosing freely. Second is choosing from alternatives. What are available alternatives? Third, choosing from alternatives after thoughtful consideration of the consequences of each alternative, after weighing what is the pros and cons of your choice, then choosing from the alternatives. 4 is valuing the choice. Why? Asking why have I opted for this choice? 5. Valuing the choice so much as to be willing to affirm the choice to others. 6. Acting in a certain way to reflect commitment to the choice one made, and acting repeatedly according to the choice that they made, so that it becomes an embedded form of moral behavior. In values clarification approach, the role of schooling in moral education is to train young people to be able to apply the 7 stages of the process rather than to be morally educated person. So this approach is focused on processing rather than preaching morally how to be a morally educated person. Next, we have that of Kohlberg's moral dilemma discussion. This, this moral dilemma is based on Kohlberg's Heinz and his wife who is sick. So there are 5 steps. Step 1 is a moral dilemma is read out to the class. A moral dilemma is read out loud to the class. Kohlberg created a group of approximately 16 dilemmas, indicating that dilemmas could also be selected from ancient texts, literary texts, and contemporary sources. After the reading, the teacher makes sure that the group has understood and agreed upon the main points presented in the dilemma. And then, second step, the teacher raises 2 questions about the dilemma. What should the person facing the dilemma do, and why? The why question is ultimately the central discussion topic for Kohlberg because it reflects the nature of a person's orientation in terms of moral thinking. The third step, the class breaks up into small groups to discuss the participants' reactions. The reason for initially splitting into small groups is to make people feel comfortable to share their thoughts before reassembling and presenting their thoughts as a group. Step 4, a group discussion regarding what the protagonist should do and why. The teacher's role is to listen, explicate, and as much as possible, enable the participants to hear patterns that reflect all 3 levels of moral thinking. This stage is critical in enabling students to at least hear levels of thinking that are higher than theirs. In here, students may be able to listen to levels of thinking that may be lower or higher than theirs. And step 5, the teacher summarizes the entire exercise and to the extent that there were presentations reflecting the 3 levels, briefly summarizes the 3 different ways of thinking. Again, the teacher's role is to explicate, not propagate views. This discussion section was very important to Kohlberg as he believed that enabling students to hear levels of thinking higher than their own and hopefully to be influenced accordingly. Moreover, it was important to demonstrate that moral deliberation and discussions are not simply empty talking, but that issues of morality do, can, and should have solutions. The teacher's role in the entire process is based on a familiarity with the three levels of thinking, an ability to utilize and model the Socratic method of questioning, a sensitivity to group dynamics, and the ability to summarize without preaching. So those are the approaches. Now, what do governments do? What happened? What is the history of moral education and what is the move of the government towards moral education? Here is a snip or a screenshot from um, character-based education, a blog. Let me read to you. Background on the character education in the Philippines educational system. When the Philippines educational system was established on January 21, 1901, character education was one of the original subjects in the curriculum. Then it became good manners and right conduct, or GMRC, and values education in high school. Since 1901, efforts have been made and new approaches tried to strengthen the teaching of GMRC or character education. In 2002, Basic Education Curriculum, GMRC, and CE, or Character Education, were no longer included as learning areas but were integrated in all learning areas. In 2005, it was again returned as a separate subject in the elementary and high school as recommended by the President. In spite of the concerned efforts of schools to develop the character of the learners, there is evident decline in morality. I repeat that there is an evident decline in morality, honesty, discipline, respect, civility, and responsibility in our midst, in the family, in society, in government, even in schools. Thus, the observation that conventional education is incomplete when it comes to nurturing the character and personality of the students is true. Now, to address this, what did the government do? Still, um, a snip from the official gazette of the Republic of the Philippines, Republic Act number 11476 says, an act institutionalizing good manners and right conduct and values education in the K-12 curriculum, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the Philippines in Congress assembled. Short title, this act shall be known as the GMRC and Values Education Act. The state recognizes the vital role of the youth and many more. This is an act as a move in reviving the GMRC in our basic education curriculum. And this is a move of the government to address the the problem of moral education of our societies today, and to address what has been previously discussed by Ma'am Alma, which is the challenges in education. Another move is the inclusion of the four pillars of education as a lesson of the teacher education or the would-be teachers. What are these four pillars of education? We have the learning to know, the component that is very much focused on the transfer of knowledge and information, wherein the educator is at the center of the learning process, and he or she holds the power over information and its delivery, with the learners being the passive recipients. In learning to do, the pillar is more about competencies and behaviors, but also about the technical skills and abilities related to the physical environment and how we interact with it. For example, for young children, it is the ability, for example, to tie their shoes, to open a book, to ride a bike, or put a puzzle together. It is also about having digital intelligence and learning to navigate the social media platforms and online world safely, or getting from one point to another using public transportation, a bike, or a map. Learning, the third pillar, or the learning to live together, is a collective approach where government officials, the policymakers, non-government organizations, and religious leaders spread the message about living with the other, starting with differences in the immediate local community. And the last is learning to be, or sometimes it's called learning to become. This goes beyond all three: the learning to know, learning to do, and learning to live together. And this includes the spiritual learning, where one needs to feel safe to explore their state of mind in relation to self and others. The learning to be requires all three previous pillars to work together, including rather the cognitive, the social, and emotional skills, along with the values of individuals and groups to seek higher virtues to live. This is by Nasser in 2019, as cited by Corpus in their book Social Dimensions of Education. So um, those are the moral. That was the moral education discussion. And before I end, sharing from Proverbs 13:24, whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. Uh, there may be there may be so many arguments regarding the teaching, or the not teaching, disagreements regarding the teaching of moral education in classrooms. But for me, it is better to be guiding the children towards a place, towards where we think are best for them, rather than to give them freely what they want, and to see them later on um, not successful. So with that, I thank you, and these are the references for my presentation. Thank you.